Hello, everyone. It's so good to have you with us today. I am Tiffany Muller, and I'm the president of End Citizens United. And thanks for joining us for another live conversation with one of our incredible friends, leaders on the Hill, partners in this work, the one, the only amazing Congressman Joe Morelle from the great state of New York. And look, if you haven't already, if you're watching, please hit that subscribe button. Join us at democracy.news. We have about 70,000 subscribers already. And so we are bringing you the latest news that you need to know about corruption stories, about how this administration is fighting for big billionaires and not for the working families. And then we also bring you conversations like this one. So, Congressman Morelle, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I couldn't be happier. Tiffany knows this, friends. She is one of my favorite people, not only doing amazing work, but just as a human being. I'm thrilled to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, everybody. I did actually pay him to say that. Which, feels like a problem when we're going to talk about money.
Exactly. No, I'm not paid. There's no corruption involved. This is really from the depths of my heart.
Quid pro quo. Oh no, our staffs are going to be like, no, they're getting out script.
I know. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You should not have invited me if there was going to be a script involved because I could barely remember my name, Tiffany.
Well, I mean, but you remember mine.
So yeah, I do. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
All right. So we have worked together for years on trying to clean up Washington, getting the corruption out of our system. You are actually really leading efforts on the Hill kind of day in and day out to bring the entire caucus along on the reforms needed to clean up corruption in our system. But, going back, we talked about this just a few months ago. We really released a poll back in July that showed that like 80% of voters think corruption in Washington is a really big problem and that it's impacting and hurting kind of their day-to-day life. Why do you think this is an issue that resonates so deeply with voters right now?
It's really a great question. And I think, look, in some ways, Americans have always been somewhat mistrustful of government. I think we were literally forged and born in conflict with Great Britain, our independence. I mean, really, it's part of our DNA. And I think that's what makes the democracy so vibrant is people always questioning leaders. We are not beyond accountability. So you take that, but what's really happening now, I think, is it goes to the core of whether this democracy can survive. And you hate to talk in terms that are so stark, but I think this moment is different than most moments, certainly in modern history. And that is, I think Americans are losing faith. And it's the corruption in Washington that is fueling that lack of trust. And we're getting to the point where the credibility of the government and the credibility of important institutions is really being questioned ultimately. And I think you see it in voter participation numbers, which continue to struggle. You definitely see it among people of color. I had a conversation with a very good friend, a pastor of one of our larger churches here, talking about the difficulty in getting Black and brown Americans to vote. One, in many places, they're being completely disadvantaged and making it difficult. Barriers continue to be constructed. But the second, I think, is their fear or their concern that their needs aren't being met. And to your point, this overall, I mean, we're now in the midst of, in my view, the most corrupt administration in American history.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is just horrifying to people. But what's really, and you did see this reflected, I think, Tuesday across the country. And I'm not sure, as a proud Democrat, this pains me a little. I'm not sure it was anyone voting necessarily for the Democratic brand, but where they were definitely saying, a great deal about how they feel about what's going on right now in Washington. And I had to laugh when I saw Speaker Johnson, I think the day after, when answering a question, say, "Well, we all knew this was happening. It happened in blue states." I'm like, "Sorry, Mr. Speaker, that's the first time I've heard Mississippi in the modern era being referred to as a blue state."
That's right.
Or Georgia. So I think you need to look a little deeper. But I do think fundamentally regaining trust, regaining for most Americans, the belief that their government is fighting for them, not fighting against them. And so I think all of the work that we're going to do together, and I can't thank you enough for your leadership over the last many years, 15 years, Citizens United has been working, but it's now gotten, so much bigger and more pervasive in everything that goes on in the administration. It's really, it's almost mind bending and mind blowing what's happening right now.
Well, I think we are seeing a administration for sale, right? You see it whether it's bribes for pardons, and another round of them just came out today, right? Or I guess
I
late
mean,
last night.
yeah, the fake elect. So people, because people are probably getting caught up on the news
Yeah.
still, all these fake electors who some of them were clearly taken advantage of. Some of them clearly thought they were doing the right thing. A number of them knew differently and knew they were essentially participating in an attempt to send people who were not elected to their state capitals to cast electoral votes for Donald Trump when he didn't win their state. I mean, they knew they were doing it. This is as close to subversion and treason as you can possibly get. It's hard to imagine the president of the United States went out of his way and pardoned everyone because, frankly, he knows it's illegal. And they were right. I mean, he's going to make sure that they're not held accountable for following his orders to try to subvert the will of the American people. It is, if you wrote a book about this, Tiffany, if you wrote a novel, you come up with some great name, and people wouldn't buy it as talented as you are because they'd say it's absurd, that would never happen, but yet it's happening to us here in America.
Well, and then we see on top of that, you see the hundreds of millions of dollars for this new gilded ballroom, right? Coming from both corporations and big donors who have business in front of the administration. It basically what you see a president profiting off of the office. You see an administration brazenly selling access and favors. It is a pay to play corrupt system. But the self-enrichment and the concerns voters have about self-enrichment go beyond just Trump, right? And I think it's one of the reasons that we have worked so closely together is we recognize that even if both sides are not equal in the corruption, and they are not, we have to say what we would do to reform the system, to restore that faith and that trust. So what do you think are some of the most important reforms we need in order to actually get people trusting institutions again, trusting our elected officials again? Because that lack of trust is really allowing our entire system to be decimated.
Yeah, and then frankly, this corrosive effect. I mean, it's like, in the physical world, when pipes and things start to corrode to the point they literally dissipate into nothingness. I mean, we do face that, and I have great fears of that. But you're absolutely right on so many points. I mean, I really think in my mind, there's sort of four buckets that I'm thinking about as I work through talking to many of my colleagues about what this will look like. And I'm so grateful to Hakeem Jeffries for his leadership and making this the centerpiece of what we want to talk about in the next 13, 14 months. And hopefully what we do when we, hopefully,
That's right.
win the House back
We
and
are
hopefully
winning
win
the
the
House
Senate
back.
back. Yeah, I mean, we have to literally for the future. But those are really reforms in the executive branch. I mean, I was at a group yesterday here in Rochester and talking about the emoluments clause. And I says, does anybody know what that is? And of course they didn't, but they understand that the Constitution has prohibitions on any president basically benefiting financially off of the office. I mean, that's the whole point of it. Um, and I was recounting the story. I don't want to go into too long, but I was hearing a member of the United States Senate say when the plane from Qatar was coming over, say, well, this is like the Statue of Liberty. Democrats should learn history. Like, well, first of all, Grover Cleveland, who was president when the good people of France gave the good people of the United States the Statue of Liberty, Grover Cleveland didn't take it home and put it in his backyard when it was all done. And secondly, both houses of Congress passed resolutions as the Constitution requires, accepting the gift. So, it's like you don't even know the law, you don't know the history, but this is so corrupt, and that's the least of it. I mean, the Trump family
Yeah.
is making billions with a B, billions of dollars on cryptocurrency and memes that are frankly completely worthless. But they're selling them. And you know what they're getting? They're getting Americans who have so little but because they have faith in this president, they're paying him and giving him money. That also, there's so much on the executive side that we need to do, and we will. The second bucket, if you will, is sort of the judiciary, a code of ethics for the United States Supreme Court, and other reforms, which we may want to do with the Supreme Court as well. Um, it is just, people who may have business in front of the court being able to give gifts of buying holes at premium prices. It's astonishing how a judge could think that even if there's not a code of ethics, why you would think that'd be okay. And then to the point you made, which is you can't do things to the judiciary and to the executive branch without looking at stock trading, for one. So reforming what members of Congress do.
Yeah.
Again, just to give confidence to people that the decisions we make, we're making because of them and what we think is right for Americans. And then the fourth bucket is all the electoral reforms that people like you have been, talking about for, 15 years since the disastrous Citizens United case. We need to undo that by constitutional amendment, most likely. Given the Supreme Court, that's the way we're going to have to do it. But other things like ending immunity for a president just because they do an official act, a preclusive and conclusive act. So there may be immunities for presidents, but there have to be other conditions have to exist. So I think that's how we begin to reclaim this notion that the government is of the people, by the people, and most importantly for the people. Because I really feel too many Americans don't believe that right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are two threads that you talked about in that answer that I really want to kind of pull on a little bit more. And one is you have been really outspoken about how President Trump, his own personal wealth since he got elected. And I've read accounts that says it's upwards of like $10 billion that he has profited off of by being elected president of the United States. And we're just seeing repeated violations, right, of this trust and our anti-corruption laws. How do we respond to that? And what do you think that the American people need to know about that?
Yeah, I think, it's so interesting. I was talking to a group yesterday about this. And what I said, it's really interesting when you think about it. The Constitution, even with the many changes that have been made over the years, there's a lot of gaps in it because, neither the framers nor members of Congress in the public over the 200 plus years that we've had this Constitution could not anticipate every fact pattern, right? So what we've really based a lot of this is on Constitution, yes, and statute, but norms where you've never had a president, I don't believe. I mean, there have been some scoundrels, let's face it, but no one on the magnitude of this president who thinks first and foremost about his own wealth and his own well-being. Instead of putting, you talk about a true public servant, a servant leader. Donald Trump has no understanding of that. I don't think it occurs to him. I think I say to people, there's three questions Donald Trump, I think, never asked in the White House when they're considering policy. One, is it constitutional? Two, is it legal? Three, is it moral and ethical? Because even if you got through the first two, you have to consider what are the norms here? What is my job here? I'm supposed to preserve, protect, defend the Constitution. And in doing that, the people that the Constitution is written on behalf of, right? So it is disgraceful. I mean, so we're going to have to put a lot of meat on the bones here, and now try to start to think about all the different fact patterns. And it's hard. You know this. I mean,
Yeah.
whenever you start this, what you just hope is that the American people are going to elect people who care deeply about their welfare, not their own. But it's going to be important for us. We have to get rid of the immunity, but through I think a constitutional amendment, refine that. We have to end Citizens United. We have to end dark money. We have to give people the belief that Elon Musk, who contributes $280 million, that somehow his voice isn't outsized. But I don't think anybody believes that. I mean, right? I mean, common sense dictates if the guy gave the president $280 million, it's likely his voice is a little larger than Joe Morelle's or Tiffany Muller's.
It's true.
And so we've got to put an end to that. And that's why I think public financing is important. I think, and I think there are a lot of people resist some of these things, but boy, if we don't make major changes, we will lose people. And when you lose their faith, that's when really, really bad things begin to happen. And we see that because really bad things are beginning to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you and I have talked about this. People people aren't looking for small tweaks at the edges, right? They think this system is so broken down, it's hurting their lives. It's leaving them further and further behind. And I was reading some, latest study on wealth inequality in America just the other day. And, the top 1% have gained $675 billion since Trump was elected. And they hold more wealth than the bottom 50% of Americans
Yeah.
combined, right? And that kind of wealth and power inequality in our system is corrupt at its core, but it's also meaning great harm to people's lives. And we saw it obviously play out in this healthcare fight. We're seeing it play out around SNAP and the weaponization of things like hunger and child hunger, right? Um, it is a place that had you told me this is where we would be even 10 years ago, I don't think I could have imagined it would be this bad.
Well, because I think to your point, because in American history, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, a Federalist, a Whig, I mean, at no point has there been such a transfer of wealth that the government does by design so that the wealthiest Americans benefit. I mean,
Yep.
the Congressional Budget Office did an analysis. The only group of Americans who will see their income rise as a result of both the tax policy and tariff policy of Donald Trump is going to be the top 1%. The only income category.
By
Think about it.
design. By design. It's not an accident.
Right. This isn't a pandemic. It's not natural disasters. This is by design. And so the only theory of governance that Donald Trump embraces, make the wealthiest wealthier. They will then continue to contribute to our campaigns and will continue to bend the law to benefit them and to hurt average Americans. It is astonishing. And to your point, during this shutdown, to use hunger as a tool to get your political ends met is, I can't think of a word. It is the most despicable,
It is
disgraceful,
immoral.
it completely immoral, and respectfully, because I'm secular in nature and no one would ever accuse me of being a member of the clergy. But when people tell me that they are Christians and go and preach on Sunday and go listen to the word and then forget it from Monday through Saturday,
Yeah.
I'm outraged at the behavior. What happened to the gospel of feeding the hungry and giving shelter to the homeless and the taking care of the poor in spirit and the poor? That's the gospel. So, again, no one's gonna ever no one's ever gonna mistake me for a member of the clergy, but it is just the hypocrisy sickens me. And if there's one thing I really dislike in life, it's hypocrisy.
I can't believe we kept that PG rated through that. I mean, I knew one of us was going to break out at least, 1, 2, 10 curse words because, I mean, you're New York and it's me. And so,
Well, anybody who's heard me privately knows that I'm not averse, but I try when my public facings to be respectful. I want to pretend that my mother is watching may she rest in peace, but is still watching everything I say. So I try to make sure. But my anger, and I think you and I share this. I just the complete frustration, the bitterness I feel about being part of a government that would turn its back. And you know what they say? I think it's Hakeem who says that cruelty is the point. Boy, you saw that play out in the last several weeks because we're fighting for people's health care that's affordable. And because the president doesn't like that, um, he then decides to get us into this place where he's now starving people, going to stop people from being able to travel, which is disruptive to business, personal life, going to visit families. This is all, let's just keep hurting people until we get what we want. It is,
yeah, absolutely.
history will record this. No matter how much the president wants to whitewash history. And again, today, pardoning people false electors, pardoning January 6th, some of the most violent people who are recommitting, by the way.
That's right.
No matter what you do, you cannot ever get rid of history. It will survive. And the story is going to be told about how we as Americans responded to this awful, awful period in American history.
Well, I had another Supreme Court question I was going to ask you about. I had a stock trading ban question I was going to
Yeah.
ask you about. So we kind of covered both of those.
Yeah.
I actually think what
You said,
oh,
I'm sorry. I know I want to interrupt, but you said something really important that I didn't want to let pass, which was sort of my three-part test that I've been talking to my colleagues about. First and foremost, we have to do both things that the American public buys is really a change in government. So first and foremost, the public has to see what we do as being real, authentic, and having an impact on their lives. Secondly, we have to make sure that the things we do meet that test. So you can't do things that the public goes, okay. So don't think we're going to do things that aren't bold because the public will never buy. And the third thing it has to do is have enough votes to pass. So I'm mindful of that. That's my three-part test for anything that we do here. But I just want to make the point that you did. It's got to be bold and it's got to be different.
that's right. Man, we have to show that we are going to govern differently, that we're not going to uphold the same broken system. That, frankly, even for some folks in our caucus, it's worked for them, right? And it's going to make them uncomfortable to make changes. But we have to be uncomfortable to end up delivering for the American people and to restore that faith and trust. But I love your last point too, which is and we have to go win the seats, right? And I think what we saw last Tuesday was the American people are with us. We know that they are sick and tired of the chaos, the corruption, the rising costs. So I actually am feeling hopeful, but there's still a long way to go. So I always end these with a what brings you hope right now? And I loved what you were talking about a minute ago, which is like how we're all coming together and fighting back. But what gives you hope right now?
So it's a really great question because people come up to me every day in the grocery store, the dry cleaner, and they'll say, How are you doing? And, I always respond.
Like a funeral or something,
Yeah.
right?
For a while, I was responding, I'm good. And they go, You are? And I go, Oh, you mean, how's the country doing? Oh, yeah, it's a disaster. But here's the thing I really do believe this. Each of us has agency. And I repeat this everywhere I go, almost every day, multiple times. The most important title in a democracy is not president, it's not congressman, it's citizen. Because this is ultimately what going back 250 years, this is what the design was. People own this. When people say, I don't do politics, I say, well, you don't have a choice. You were born a citizen of the United States or became a citizen of the United States, but you're here, you're in it. You don't get to say, that's not on me. It's on all of us. And so I feel, and I thought Tuesday, boy, what an acknowledgement of how unhappy people are. This is not what they signed up for. Donald Trump was supposed to address costs. He was supposed to address the swamp. He's made everything worse by design, and people responded. So, what gives me hope is I think Americans want decency. I think they care about their neighbors. They care about themselves, certainly, and their family and their futures. But this is not the ugliness and the darkness and the fear and all the stuff that Donald Trump is about. That may have won him an election, but it's not winning him the heart and soul of American people. So we have to translate those things. What happened on Tuesday is now our job for the next 361 days or so
Right.
to translate that into something that people know will be meaningful for them, their children, their grandchildren, and for posterity.
Well, and I keep saying, and I will keep saying it, and courage is contagious. Show up in whatever way you can and be a part of this fight in whatever way you can because it matters. And it matters to the results next year when we have the opportunity to put a stop on this corrupt administration. So,
And even though I'm not a clergyman, I'm going to say amen to that. Amen.
for everyone watching, please subscribe to democracy.news and look for our 3 time a week newsletter and more conversations like this. And Congressman Morelle, it's always such a highlight to get to spend time with you. And I can't wait to see you again soon.
Me too. I'm a big fan and I'll continue to be a fan. And I look forward to seeing you in person. Thank you, my friend.
All right. Talk to you soon.